I'm your freaking manager. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about Gwar. And this is Thunderdome Metal Reviews. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm the Dr. David Pizza, who has many relatives in Jersey or Philly, which is Sleazy P adjacent. With me, as always, are Ben, the jaded as fuck, got a lot of bourbon Lindsay. How are you, Ben?
Drinking that bourbon and listening to Gwar, so pretty good.
And being jaded. And then we got Tracy, the mass slaughterer of all avian life, Newport. How are you, Tracy?
I'm doing pretty good.
Then we have feature artist Gabriel, the basement Cooper. What's going on, man?
America must be destroyed, man. America must be destroyed.
The timing of this, we were supposed to record this on 9/11, which we didn't. It is 9/12. We didn't plan that.
I think that's why you planned it, David. It's like, oh, guys, we can't do this today. God's working against us.
I will say, should I talk a little bit about why we're doing this and then my justification for what I
sure
did? So Tracy is to blame for the overall experience. So Tracy, who loves a good theme, carried out at the expense of all life for months. So it was Paradise Lost. He's like, we should do Gwar. And I was like, oh, Tracy, you poor bastard. Like, you don't even know what you're saying, but I was so excited. But then Tracy very kindly is like, all right, which ones? Their discography is huge. And then there are now, I think, 2 albums without Odorous. So right off the bat, I can't. And we can talk about this. And I'm not always like this, but Dave Brockie was such a huge part of this. The Bloviator is even okay. He's Beefcake, or one of the Beefcakes. And I've heard a little of it, and it's okay. But I'm just so devastated, though in no way surprised, that he's dead. I mean, he painted houses for a living and did a lot of heroin and lived in a shack. I can't believe he made it as long as he did. So those albums were out. But then where to start? And I know a lot of people that started with Scumdogs. That was their second album that some people think is their best. That's the album I got in on. That's the first one I heard. But I feel, in a way that we will have to talk about this album a little bit, 1, I don't think they quite come into their own, and 2, I think they do a little more punching down on that album than I'm comfortable with, in terms of who they're making fun of and how they deploy satire. And I know this will come as no surprise to anyone. The point of all this is just to offend people. I absolutely understand that. There's plenty of offensive shit on this album. But I think this album is a lot better. And I wanted to sort of go from this to the end of Dave Brockie's life. So I cut Scumdogs. I have a feeling we'll circle back to that and just do an episode with it at some point. So it's not gone forever. But so you can all hate me for starting with America Must Be Destroyed. But this album also is fucking badass. And I've been on the Gwar ride since way too young, way younger than I should have been, because my friend Pierre, who's visiting right now, his older brother's friends listen to Gwar. So I was in middle school hearing the shit and probably shouldn't have been. So I've been, and then, in high school and college and even grad school, I went to a lot of Gwar shows. I took my now wife to a Gwar show. That was like a trial by fire. I cannot believe she went to that show.
That's when you knew she was the one.
Yeah, dude. She can hang. Though one of the things we have to talk about, then I've said a lot, I apologize, I'll stop. But one of the things we have to talk about is, does this work without the stage show? Because it is a multimedia experience that is, I think, draws on Dadaism. I think it draws on wrestling. This album reminded me of how much it draws on 1980s wrestling, which is more Ben's zone of expertise. Does it work without the stage show? I don't know. I'm interested to see what you all think, because I think, have any of you seen Gwar? I'm not trying to be that guy, but
I haven't.
I've never seen them live. I've seen all the movies, and I've seen
that
concerts,
helps.
So
the movies help a lot, because that's the thing. All of them also had a movie that came with them. This one in particular, a little of my handy sugar substitute. Yeah, it's Gwar. Anyway, so that's my spiel about why we're doing this and why we started with Gwar. And I'd love to hear everyone else's journey. And then I think we should say a little bit about the Richmond scene. I think there's a lot to say to set us up on this 10 album ride, because they're like a cultural force. Without them, no Lamb of God, Tracy.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. I was listening to a podcast with Randy Blythe in it. Mm-hmm. And apparently Brockie called him one time. And he's like, hey, man, I got an idea to get you involved in the Gwar show. He's like, really? And Randy said, as they were talking about it, you could see the odors start to kind of peak out and start to take control. And then by the end of the conversation, he was talking to Odorous instead of Dave Brockie about doing the concert and how to fit into the album.
Well, before we get into all that, let's go ahead and give the particulars of this album.
Well, I thought we're talking about our experience with them before we even touch this album.
Let me get this out of the way first, just
Okay.
so that we have been sitting on that one slide for a while. So this is America's Must Be Destroyed. It was released on March 31st of 1992. It is the third studio album released on Metal Blade Records, produced by Glenn Robinson, and has a runtime of 47 minutes and 43 seconds. The band, for the uninitiated, is Dave Brockie, Odorous Arungus, lead vocals, Mike Dirks, Ballsack, The Jaws of Death, lead guitars, rhythm guitars, and backing vocals, Michael Bishop, Beefcake the Mighty, bass and backing vocals, lead vocals on Pussy Planet, Brad Roberts, Jiz Mac Dakusha on drums, Danielle Stomp, Silvestre Hyman, backing vocals, Chuck Varga, Sexecutioner, spoken words at the end of Pussy Planet, Hunter Jackson, Edna P. Granbo, vocals on the Morality Squad, and Dave Musil samples on America Must Be Destroyed. So and since I did that, I will begin with my journey. I have been on this for a long time. I think I came in, my buddy had a copy of Hello. So their first album, this is probably, and I heard Scumdogs, but this is probably the one where I really became a fan. And actually, this might have been the new one when I heard those other two. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like we had the VHS tapes and this, and we just, it was just so over the top. And being a 1980s wrestling fan, yeah, just the promos and just the crazy dudes in costumes beating up fucking dinosaurs and all kinds of other crazy shit that was going on. Hell yeah, I was into this. It was a puppet show at a monster truck rally. How could you not be into it? So, totally. And that was transgressive and like super sexually explicit in the grossest ways. And it was just badass. It was like any teenage boy's like literal wet dream come to life. Just insane, over the top stuff.
Yes, and I think it was deliberately the anti-Reagan.
Yes.
Right, that moral majority shit, that's very clear. I'm sure when we get into songs, we'll talk about that. You know, and this was a fucked up era. This is during the first Gulf War, and it was just, this album's titled the way it is for a reason.
Well, just the impetus for this album, which I will get into after we hear everybody else's. But yeah, sure. So I don't know if Gabe or Tracy, which one of you wants to go next?
Mine's easy and simple enough to go with. This is my first ever encounter with Gwar other than knowing who they were. So I am, to an extent, a Gwar virgin, and this is all going to be fresh to me.
Not anymore. This thing happened to you.
Too late.
Have you seen me occurred to you?
Yeah, so I didn't really know a whole lot about Gwar for, I would say, the majority of my life. And then when I was in grad school, I met this guy in a bar who was named Mike, and later it was told to me that that was Michael Bishop, who was the bassist in Gwar, and he did a PhD where I did a PhD in the music department. He did one music, I did German, but then I was like, whoa, I should actually figure out who this band is, and a couple of years after that, I started kind of listening around to their early records. And this was one of the ones that I decided to listen to. So this isn't my first turn with the record, but I would say it's my first attempt to process it in a serious way, because I was just like, I don't know, getting a feel for what it was that this band did. And I also went to a talk that Mike gave once, you know, and that was really interesting because I got to learn a lot about, you know, the Richmond art scene at the time when Gwar was doing their thing. But yeah, I hadn't really encountered their music before I randomly met this guy. But yeah.
Two of them also have law degrees from Duke. There's a lot going on in this band.
For sure.
They have their fall by plans in order.
They did it for the love of it. And
I know.
No one committed more than Dave Brockie. I mean, the motherfucker.
I mean, if you were given an option to play in Gwar full time and make a living of it, would you not? Because I mean, that's fun with a few probably close encounters with death involved.
The funny thing,
some people out though, dude, because there's a lot of turnover in this band. So
there is.
Well, like the two lawyers have been there since the beginning, haven't they?
I think so. But the other thing that's interesting, of course, is starting with this album through This Toilet Earth and into Ragnarok, they had a shit ton of money, largely because of like Beavis and Butthead. You know, it was one of those, they got a little bit of MTV airplay, despite / because of how transgressive they were. And I think they blew nearly all of it on the stage show itself. And Gwar just like funneled it back. Like, I don't think any of them had much to show for it. Dave Rocky certainly didn't. Drugs probably didn't help. But the stuff they were doing was really fucking expensive and very intense. And you could tell when their money stream was reduced after Ragnarok because the shows got smaller. Like, you could really tell they hadn't necessarily changed what the world had, and Beavis and Butthead was a distant memory, and they just weren't that popular anymore. But for a while, this thing was bananas. Exactly as Ben is saying, these stage shows, they were enormous. I mean, there was like a dinosaur that was, I don't know, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I really think that thing was like 12 feet tall. It was massive.
It was at least Eddie sized.
Yeah, it was huge. And there was the World Maggot. That's when we were getting towards the Toilet Earth. The movies are completely batshit ridiculous, wild. I don't even know how to put those into words. This one included.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, the only thing that I can think of as far as stage show that's close, and it's going to be weird, is ICP. Just because
That's valid.
Just not necessarily because of what's going on stage, because, you know, in some ways, in that sense, you know, it's very Spinal Tap-ish or Iron Maiden, but it's the fact that it's the interaction, like a Rocky Horror Picture Show, going to see that, where you're going to get messy. There's going to be fake blood or other bodily fluids on you, whereas at an ICP show, it's going to be fake-o, but whatever. It's just very messy and very crowd interactive.
Well, now that you mention that, I was thinking that, you know, because ICP with their Jaguar Productions have released movies as well. And I feel like Gwar and ICP are kind of like operating within,
I agree with that,
different areas, like different genres, together, but they're operating in the similar, like, same vein.
And if you look, I'm sorry, if you look at the ICP Big Money Hustlers or any of those movies, and just the costuming and the overall character design,
Pizza Face or Pizza?
Yes, it is very, very similar to what Gwar was doing.
I also think they are similar bands in that they have, whatever their ups and downs in terms of what counts for popularity in metal, they have die-hard cult followings. Like, the people that like ICP and like Gwar like them a lot. That includes me, by the way. I went to more Gwar shows than probably any other band other than Slayer, and those shows were a commitment. Like, sometimes I was wearing like a fucking helmet, and I mean, it is like Rocky Horror Picture Show, but you're gonna get your ass beat, and you're gonna be sprayed with, you know, Tang out of O.J. Simpson's ripped out eye sockets. Like, that's true story, Gabe. Like, it's just, and they were always pillaring whatever's in the news at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've seen so many famous people murdered by Gwar on stage. Bush 1, Bush 2, Clinton, like, just, you know, Obama. I mean, they didn't care. And some of what's on this album is problematic, and they would not deny that. And I think they get better. There's some stuff that even I get a little bit uncomfortable with. I guess we'll talk about it. And they back off that. I think there's a little bit less punching down in later albums, but only a little. I mean, there's a song called Baby Raper on. What is that, 2 after this? I mean, it's...
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember.
Oh, boy.
Straight up.
Wait.
Yeah, dude, it's a lot.
I mean, and I guess the Two Lawyers are too, but this is a very strict free speech band. Come out and say whatever the fuck you want. I mean, the entire impetus behind this particular album was Brocky on stage had a codpiece that he called the what was it, the Cuttlefish of Cthulhu?
Oh, yes, the Cuttlefish of Cthulhu, indeed.
And some cops in Raleigh just confiscate it, and he gets into a fist fight with the cops and all this shit. And it's this whole moral majorities thing. So he comes up with this idea of, hey, there's all this moral majority shit from the 80s, and the ravenous, and not as ravenous as would later happen, but patriotism of the time of the first Gulf War. And it's directly at that there is this group of, like, Team America, the morality police or the morality squad, who are coming to fight the scumdogs of the universe that is Gwar.
They got banned from, I don't remember if it was just every city in the Triangle or the whole state, but they got banned from anything close to me. We used to have to go to like Virginia and shit for a while. And then eventually they were performing in North Carolina again, like Tarboro or whatever. I'm from North Carolina, just to disclose that. But yeah, they got fucking banned after that. It was a hot damn mess. But Raleigh's also slightly fascist, not as much as Charlotte, but no offense to anyone. But yeah, the Raleigh PD will fuck you up. And they did that here, and Brocky was enraged.
Very much so.
And the result was this, which is him just taking a shit on that scene. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, and it's so genre hopping in that there's a little bit of thrash. There's actually quite a bit of glam metal on here.
Punk.
Yep.
Punk.
And I'm here for all of it, but this is a very and it also walks the line, as you can, if you're not familiar with Gwar. Gwar is satire in the sense of when oh fuck, I can't think of his name suddenly. The famous rock satirist.
Weird Al.
Yes, thank you. When Weird Al writes his own songs as opposed to when he does his parody songs. And that's a lot of what this is. It's very satirical, not always smart satire, but always guttural satire.
I mean, I think let's back that up just a second there. I think the album concept is really brilliant. Like, I think it's a really great concept for an album. Maybe their humor is not like, the most intellectually profound, humor, but hey.
No, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's very visceral, and that's really what it's meant to be. And I think that I say that not all of it was the smartest, but some of it was. I mean, and they would layer that incredibly well, in my opinion. And that there would be stuff that if you were politically aware was very biting satire, but then there would also just be toilet humor that was thrown out there too. So it was working on multiple levels.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's brilliant too. Like that kind of mixture is really, it's a winning combination.
I think it works. I think because all of the people were so offended by the pageantry and the blood gushing and the pooping on the forehead that I think they missed. This is some of the most scathing shit about American politics and U.S. foreign policy you will get unless you look at stuff from the same era, like Ministry, I think is in that realm too. I mean, this is, Chomsky grade pissed off at how all of this works. And that becomes very clear when you watch the movie. Arabs, when they're not working for you, they are working against you.
Yep.
Because it gets into the anti-Arab racism that underlay everything surrounding both goddamn Gulf Wars. I mean, it does not pull any punches. And this Morality Squad shit is not just the moral majority stuff. It's also the Tipper Gore shit, which they hate it, and I do too. Jesus, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is really brilliant about this, and not to go too far ahead, but I think it's really amazing that classic rock is the language Gwar uses to shit all over the boomers. It's absolutely correct. It's absolutely correct. It's absolutely the right choice, and it's amazing.
Well said. That's exactly what they do.
Yeah. Anything else? I mean, because we've talked a lot about the concept of the band and what's surrounding the band, and only very sparsely about the specific album so far.
I guess I'll go first.
Go. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
Well, you go first.
I was simply going to say also Richmond is all kinds of fucked up. Mm-hmm. Richmond, and this is a city I know well. It was like the closest big city to us other than Raleigh. It's both a really cool town, has a really cool vibe. The art scene, as Gabe mentions, is massive. There's a bunch of art institutes at schools, a bunch of universities there, but it's also Confederate as fuck. Like that place. Oh my God. I mean, I guess Charlottesville is a little bit like that to some degree, but not like that.
Museum of the Confederacy.
Yeah, that's
three words.
That drag where there was like monument after monument. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah, Monument Avenue.
That's it.
Museum of the Confederacy, which is basically like a museum where the viewpoint is War of Northern Aggression, and
indeed.
It's to this day, as far as I know.
I think it's the same. So Gwar was not only sort of transgressive in kind of a national context or idiom. Locally, this was stunning. I mean, I think that's where this radicalism came from. Lamb of God, same. they come out of that same scene, and essentially were given their break by Gwar in part, like they were sort of in that scene and helped them out. But yeah, okay. So Tracy, I just wanted to say that thing, that where they come from, I think only made them harder.
So I was going to just speak about this album. It was been pointed out that we hadn't really talked about that much, but I was going to say, I don't know exactly, I didn't know exactly what to expect coming in this, but I was expecting different. But I got what I was glad to have gotten in that sense. It's like I was expecting probably a little more shock rock, almost even like more so than it is. But this is definitely like are more over the top and everything that they did. I don't know exactly what I was expecting in full, but I was pleasantly surprised by it.
I think I want to address something that David brought up at the beginning, which is the fact that this is like a companion piece to like what's happening on stage. And I think it's like it's an important point. But at the same time, I think the album has to stand on its own regardless, right? I mean, David, we could talk about Brecht and talk about, Kurt Weill's songs. If the Kurt Weill songs weren't good, and couldn't stand on their own, they wouldn't fit in the Brecht plays, you know what I'm saying? So I think I didn't think enough about the stage, but that explains, I think, some of the things about the album that, maybe are a little bit incongruent or a little bit like, okay, why?
Well, like cracking the egg, they're cracking a giant egg.
Right, exactly.
Gorgor,
it's
the
like,
dinosaurs on set. Like
there's a whole story. There's a whole storyboard.
Yeah.
There's a whole narrative arc. And I get that and I appreciate it. There are some parts of it that are really cool, and there are other parts that just don't work for me. And that's fine.
I think in addition to that, because this is such a politically reactive album, and to some extent they all are, there are parts of this, because this is America and the soft underbelly of America has not really changed that much, that are still applicable, but there are others that are very much a time capsule of the moment. And so that plays into it as well, in addition to the fact that this is essentially a soundtrack to a stage show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that is a danger with any politically conscious work.
Yep.
If it happens to be, addressing certain contemporary issues that are no longer contemporary, it's going to lose some edge. But what's nice is I think a lot of this still holds.
I do too. I do as well. Anything else?
We got a lot of Gwar in front of us. That's why I wanted to do I wanted to do some of that backstory stuff up here, so as we get into these, we can just plow into them.
Yeah, and from my own perspective, I'm really looking forward to see what else they have, because this album's fairly good overall, and so I'm looking forward to it. And I know I don't have the history with you guys of like comparing it, so maybe by that last album, like, oh man, I don't know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. All right. Tracks.
So I'm going to lean off on this one because I'm the new fresh face here for Gwar. I think it starts really good with that 1, 2, 3 combo of Ham on the Bone, Cracking the Egg, and Gorgor. I think it does dip from Have You Seen Me through America Must Be Destroyed. I think it picks back up with Gilded Lily, and I think it carries strong for the rest of the album, back half of the rest of the album. I think the back half is a better part of the album. I think the back half is better than the front.
Huh, that's interesting. Because I actually don't care much for the first 3, mainly because I do associate those so much with the movie. So without that element, I don't think that they work as just individual songs. But Have You Seen Me and Morality Squad, I really like. I actually don't like America Must Be Destroyed. Again, I mean, just the samples and the instrumentals, like whatever.
The white man has a God complex.
Right. Well, I don't disagree with that, but it's just like as a composition,
it's not great. Yeah, it's
But
as a song. It's
you
not
have
good.
You have to admit, given 1992 White Zombie Ministry, like it's so much
Totally of its time.
in
Yes.
that space. I think it's one of those dated things on here.
Exactly. That's just it. It just sounds dated. But then the rest of it, like I love The Road Behind, and Rock and Roll Never Felt So Good, and like Tracy said, from Gilded Lily on, love it. And The Road Behind is just the ultimate satirical deconstruction of power ballads, and I am so here for it. Just put your clown britches on.
All right, I guess I'll jump in. I actually have the opposite take from from Ben on this, especially because I haven't seen the movie. I think that's part of it. I really dig the first three tracks. Gwar Gwar has got a little repetitive lyrics, but otherwise it's just fine with me. And I think Hammer on the Bone and Crack in the Egg are just exciting. I'm there for it. Have You Seen Me? Not super into it. Mostly just for the gay bashing. Can't really say that I like that. Morality Squad, I think, is really great. It's a nice classic rock send up with fun lyrics. I actually don't mind America Must Be Destroyed. It may be dated, but it works. I really like also Rock and Roll Never Felt So Good. I didn't dig Gilded Lily so much. It's a bit silly. The music is just okay. Poor Old Tom, like why the British accent and why the Nazis have to show up in this song, I just don't understand and would prefer not to have in a song if not necessary. And then Blimey, I'm here for the history lesson and also the tunes, which I think are rather good. The rest of it is kind of, I think Road Behind is really dated, actually. Like if you're listening to it and you don't know who Axl Rose is, it's completely meaningless and has no value. But like, it is satire, sure. It is parody of a kind.
You're going to get a lot more Nazi, though, with more intentionality. I do feel like it's just dropped in here sort of randomly in Poor Old Tom. But I think Ham on the Bone is badass as an opener. Yeah, I'm with Gabe on I feel like even without the stage show or the movie, I feel like the first three tracks are really exciting and fast and fun. I like them. Have You Seen Me? The homophobia pisses me off, and there's more of that on Scumdogs. That's one of the reasons I'm like, I can't. There's less of it after this. That's what I mean about they get a bit better about not punching down when really their target is supposed to be, other things. That being said, the riff in Have You Seen Me is so good. It pisses me off. It's that bass part when it speeds up is one of the best riffs I've ever heard in my life. Like straight up. I think it's amazing. But again, Gabe, it pisses me off. Morality Squad is awesome. Like it's ludicrous, but again, I've seen this stage show, so for me, I just start getting nostalgic. Like I remember getting kicked in the head, and then Grambo is like spraying us, and America Must Be Destroyed doesn't bother me. Maybe just because part of my head will never escape 1992. I think Gilded Lily, Poor Old Tom drag a little bit. That part of the album is not my favorite, but I think it picks up again with, I think Gabe said it quite well, where the boomers are impaled with their own music. With Rock and Roll Never Felt So Good. Road Behind, I can't even, I'm too close to it, maybe like Ben. I can't judge it on its artistic merits, but man, that was such a monster in its time. And it's just so fun. The video is ridiculous. I don't know. I just love it. And I won't die on the hill of, is it good? I couldn't even say. I just like Ben. I'm so here for it. Pussy Planet is throwaway, but they know it too. Half the song is them like yelling at each other and throwing shit.
Yeah.
I think Executioner wanted lines, so they but it's a fun record. You're gonna get a lot more of this. And I would argue, while it's still very inappropriate, all chorus inappropriate, there's a little bit less, and I may be remembering wrong, but than the homophobia that pissed me off and Have You Seen Me? Yeah, don't do that shit. And they do it less later. Anyway.
Well, it's time to grade.
Who wants to go first? Maybe Tracy. I almost feel like, as the person who came in to like the blind tasting.
For me, I'm going to give it an A-, because I don't know where I really enjoyed this album. I don't know where you guys canonically put these in your ratings. And so I'm interested to see if they go up, if they go down, like pretty good. Or I would say a great album.
I'm not as experienced as the other guys with this band, so I'm basically on the same footing as you, Tracy. Only I've heard a couple of the albums before, but I'm going to set my baseline a little bit lower than you at a B, because I think it's a good album. It's got a lot of places where I just didn't really get it and wasn't along for the ride, but the moments that I thought were good were very, very good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next.
So I'm going to give this a grade that is right in line with what Gabe gave it, B, only because I'm grading the album itself as a piece of media. My attachment to it is much higher. I really, really like this album, but I don't think that if like and I would do this with all satire. As much as I might like Weird Al stuff, a good to great Weird Al album is not as good as anybody else's album because it's derivative. And this really doesn't have that. It isn't derivative, but because there is so much more going on with it that it would be, to me, it's like grading the soundtrack to Rocky Horror as opposed to the entire thing. So in that way, it would suffer a little bit, and that's why I'm giving this a B.
Some people think this is their best one, or Scumdogs, interestingly, and part of that may be nostalgia. It is one of my favorites, but I don't think it's their best. You're going to see there's some albums after this I rank higher than this. I still am going to give this an A-, just because I love Gwar a lot, and I'm willing to write off some of it being 1992, some at least. But there are better albums than this. But for me, it's an A-. It's a great album. It's good shit.
You guys have been wondering if I overshot. And I was like, oh shit.
No, this is one of their better albums. This is good shit. This album is good.
You got to go with your gut, Tracy.
They meander for a bit. There's like a lot of lineup changes, and there's some albums. I love Gwar, but there's some albums of this I think that are misses, actually. So I think you can take it or leave it, Tracy, but as the person who I don't want to speak for Ben, but may have listened to the most Gwar, you and I came in at the same grade.
Yeah, I would actually rank this as one of my favorite ones of their albums. It's just like I said, there is something about the album itself as decontextualized from the rest of it that causes me to give it a little bit. And this is probably the one that I've listened to the most. Mm-hmm. Scumdogs is probably close, but just because when I found this, it was, you find something like this. In 92, I would have been like, what? Gosh, 16. Yeah, you're going to indulge in this as much as you can. So I mean, I listened to this and listened to this and listened to this. So in a way that when I was then older and getting into my 20s with the other albums, I just didn't listen to them with the same fervent intensity that I did this with.
Sure. Well, what are we doing next, Tracy?
Next, we are looking at their album, I believe, released right after this one, in This Toilet Earth.
That is some good shit, and I'm super bummed. That album, I won't give it away, but Tracy, I hope you like that album.
I do too.
I think it made them at the peak of their power. Like it's getting into, we'll see. I'm not going to give it away. It's good shit though. Everyone should listen to it every day, every hour, and nothing else exclusively. Don't do that. I'm not going to pay for your therapy.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you for listening to Thunderdome Metal Reviews, and we'll catch you next time.